Let me start and let me share my screen. Today I changed to a bigger screen so you guys can see. Okay, sorry. Yes, in the last lecture, what we did was we did some of the initial setup that we might need, especially in terms of the application setup, where we use NX to set up our workspaces, and we just had one of Angular application setup, and we created a simple form, but I'll walk through the form once again for you guys' reference. But we achieved we achieved the routings, if you guys can remember. We achieved routing using lazy loading. By the way, the font size is visible, I hope. We achieved lazy loading by using these load component method. But if you just use the component attribute, it will just eager load. That means it will automatically load without any lazy initialization. But if you use the load component and the import statement, this component will be lazy loaded. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is a huge improvement over our applications runtime. We don't need to load everything at once. We load things when we really need to go to that URL, or when we really need that component to be interact with. Otherwise, what we'll do is we will just let it be, and once it is needed, we will just load it. Okay, so we created two components. One is the login component, which you see right now, and the other one is the admin component. So if you just dummy the login, it will go to these admin works, the default components. Okay, so today we will be focusing on the form creations at this point. So last time we roughly went through the form creation, but today I'm gonna give you more in-depth insight about form creations. Okay, so first thing first, we need something called reactive form modules, a module which Angular provides, which we can interact with from creation, from validation. There are a lot of things going on with the reactive forms module. So we can create a dynamic and very robust forms. Okay, so first thing first, we need to import that reactive form modules into our component. Then we have the capabilities of reactive forms. Okay, and next thing is we have something called form groups. Okay, which is essentially something we can merge to a form. Okay, so form group is like the parent of a form. This is the place where we model our form. So if you guys can see in our UI, we have two input fields. One is for email, one is for password. Okay, so each and every within one of the within this form, we have two form controllers. Okay, email controller and a password controller. So we are going to model it in here like this. So we will create a variable called form group. Okay, you can name it whatever you like. If you like this to be login form group, yes, that's okay. For simplicity, I will just call it form group. But if you have multiple, I would recommend to go with a meaningful name. Right now, we have one single form group, and we will instantiate a form group. This is where the logic happens. This is not the UI. If you want the UI, of course, you have to go to the HTML. And HTML in here, these are not something from reactive form models. These are from material designs, if you guys can remember. This is an input field, and this is also an input field. This is nothing to do with logic behind it. This is just the UI behind it. So the UI that you see the title, the input field for email password, these are created by only these two variables, only these two HTML markups. Okay, so there is no connection between the controller and the form yet. Okay, we'll make that connection. Right now, we will model this in the logical view. That means within the component. So we will have a form group which will contain an email and a password. So remember, when we are naming these things, so email is going to be the variable that it is going to bind the value, and we will have a controller, a new controller. It is called as form controller. So each and every variable that we have here, so there's going to be a variable called email, and it's going to be a type of form control. There are going to be a password, and it's going to be a type of form control. So these are like loosely coupled form types, but we can have more strong form controllers as well. For instance, the password can be only strings. It's not going to be something going to be an integer only, something like that. So we can have that type form, we call those things. So we have strict types. So if it is an email, it's going to be an email for sure. That's kind of things we can do. Right now, we are not going to stick into, we will not stick into very strictly typed forms, but we will create a loosely typed form. Then we will see in the future how we can make it more strict. So the user have more validation, or user have more control over the forms, so they don't do any mistakes by they are doing the data entry parts. Okay, so this is the model. As I mentioned earlier, this is the logic behind it, and this is the UI behind it. So there is no connection between these two, so we will make that connection. So this is the model. It's going to be exactly same as this, but it is not mandatory to be the same. We can have some hidden fields. We will look into those things in a little bit. But right now, it's going to be a one-to-one match for the UI. So UI have this email and this password. Okay. So we will bind these things. How are we going to bind these things? First, let me go to the inspect section of the application. And right now, what I'm going to do is I will have a device selected in here. I will choose something like a phone or something. Yeah, that would make works. Okay, I'll just have the console with more space. At least I can interact with these things. Okay, so right now what we do is there's a button, we call that a login button, and on click of that button we execute this function on login function. Okay, on this login function, what I do simply is I have the reference to this form group. That's why I call this dot form group. And whatever the value that is stored in here, whatever the value that I have stored in here, if I need to get that, I can just simply call form group dot value. Okay, this will return whatever the value binded to this form group. Okay, there are so many things other than that. If you click on here, there is add controllers, add validators, dirty. We will see each one and by one at a time. Right now, we are interested in the value of this form group. So whatever the value that you will see stored within this form group, it will be printed out when we click on login. Okay, right now, I will go and click login. Now you can see there are two fields which corresponding to the form group values that we have, the email and the password, and both are null. Okay, the values, they haven't binded anything. I can do something easy. So if I go in here with the first form controller, the email one, if I say, okay, I will have the I will have the email as a default value as srandik@mail.com. Okay, now if I hit save, you guys can see there is nothing has changed. The UI haven't changed, but if I click login now, Now you guys can see the value that I have put in this form controller is binded to the email itself. Same goes to the password. If I say password, and if I hit login, what will happen right now is the value, the value which I have given to this form controller will be binded to this email. Same goes to the password. So these are default values, but what we need is something more, um, more dynamic. That means whatever the user type in, this email section, we should have it. We should show it. That's our requirement. Okay, so we need to make the UI section, this email, and this controller, this form controller, to talk to each other. So they know, okay, whenever we type in something in this email, it will automatically update this email form controller. Whatever we type in this password, it will be binded to this password, and that means this form controller will be updated. So we need to make a connection between the UI and this form. Okay, fairly simple. What you need to do is you have to set up a form controller. Really simple stuff. If you go, since this form group is accessible from our HTML, I can go on top and I have this attribute called form group. Okay, remember this form group attribute only comes or only enables if you have only imported the reactive form group module. If you haven't imported it, you won't get, you can create form groups, but you won't be able to use this input binding. Okay, so what I have to do is the name as suggests, I will have something called form group. And what is the variable that we're going to be binding? What is the form group value that we're going to go? It's going to be form group. So to reduce complexity or reduce the confusion, I will name this as login form group. Okay, so I have renamed this to login form group. Now in the login HTML, the form group which is representing this form is going to be login form group. Okay, so we have a form group which represents this form, and its name is login form group. You can see it's directed to this login form group. Okay, so one step is done. This form is now officially binding, but have been binded with this login form group. The next thing is there are two controllers in here. So there are two controls in here. Which one is, first one is the email, the second one is the password. Okay, so the thing is, now we need to say which controller. So this form group have two controllers. One is called email, the other one is called password. So we need to make sure the email form controller binds to its names, the corresponding form controller, and the password form controller binds to its intended form controller. Okay, we have two form controllers. One is for email, one for password. But in here we have two UIs, one for email, one for password, and we need to make sure we bind correct form controller to the correct element. Okay, this element should be binded with the email form controller. This element should be binded with the password form controller. So how are we going to do that? Really simple. We have something called form control name. What is the name of the form control? So we have named this as email. This is the name of the form controller. I can just simply say email here. Okay, same goes in here, form controller name, and this one is called password. Okay, email, is it email? No value accessor form controller email, find more. Yeah, it should be here, right? Name one no value accessor for form controller email. Okay. Let me remove that. No, sorry. The form controller name should go in, not in the form field itself, but the input field. Okay. Sorry about that. The form controller name, it should be in the input field, not the form field. Okay, because this input field is where the binding happens. This is where we input these things. These are like only UI related stylings and all those things going on. Right now, the input is where the binding should happen. And if I click in here, and if I say h1 decur and password as password, and now if I click login, now you guys can see when I do the binding, it's automatically bind whatever the value that I have put in here and the password that we have put in here. So the binding happens magically with the correct form controller name. Okay, so we bind the form group first, and each and every form controller for each and every input element that we have. Okay, any questions up until this? It's a simple binding, very simple, very easy to understand. All you have to do is define the UI, define the form group which is responsible, which define the form controllers which are responsible for each and every input. Any questions up until this? Because I'm going to do this in another way. You can also try it out. Okay, I suppose everyone understand this. Okay, so there is another way that we can do. We can define these form controllers on the outside. Okay, so what I can do is the email one new form controller is defined in here. I can define it on the constructor itself. So I can say email CTRL, short for controllers, and new form controller. Okay. And I can say, I'll do only one. So I will do email controller. Rather than initiating in here, I can say this dot email controller. Now what happens is we have this email controller in the outside like this, and we have an email, a field, a form field called email, and this still works. Okay, ASD and login, you can see it's still works. Okay, I have just moved the email controller one notch a bit. And from another perspective, I can bind this controller directly in the HTML. So rather than using the attribute form control name, there's an attribute called form control. I can directly bind the form control here. Rather than giving the name itself, I can give the email controller. The controller itself I can bind. So in here we have bind using the name of the form controller. In here, in the email section, we are binding the form controller directly the form controller in here. We are not using the name. The name does not matter as long as it is binded to this controller. So this controller will be binded to this input field. So let me show it works. ASD at ASD, and the password is going to be the same. So as you guys can see, by using two ways, either you can directly bind the form controller, or you can directly bind the controller name. Either way, it works. So you can bind these form group in two different ways. Okay. So any questions up until this? I'm going to move into a few other things in the next section. Okay. If you have anything, just let me know in the chat or raise your hand, please. So for example, I need a default value to be put in here. Like if I refresh this, as you can see, it goes away. I need a default value to be put in here. I will say in the controller itself, I can put the default value as the first argument. So hrun@mail.com. If I save it, now you guys can see by default, it has a value that I have put in. Okay, so even though I refresh it, the initial value, since I have hard coded here, it's going to show up in here. Okay, that is something that we can do. And the next thing that I will be teaching you guys is something called validations. Okay, these email fields, these texts, whatever the things that we're going to do, we need to make sure front-end validations happen, front-end side, the validations happens, and user is aware of okay, this is an invalid field, or we show them an error saying okay, you need to correct this or some sort of things. So in order to do that, what we can do is we can introduce validators for these form controllers. Each and every form controller can have validator. The whole form group as can have a validator. Right now, I'm going to be focusing on the email controller validation. So you guys can see this is a legitimate form control for email value. But if I want to make it validated at the first go, I can do that. So the how we can introduce validators to our form controller? Really simple. The first argument of this controller is going to be the default value. And the next argument, as you can see, there is something called validator or options. Form control option, validator function array, null or undefined. Those are accepting as the validators. Okay, so I'll add an validator in here. So Angular has some built-in validators. Like if a field is required, we can show a required, we can put in a required validator. So the user need to type in something, otherwise the form say it is not valid. And there is validators for email, where you can say, okay, this should be an email field. There are min, max, length. There are a lot of going on, but right now I will be focusing on two validators. One is the required validator. The other one is the email validator. So I have a requirement. The requirement is email should not be null. That means email is required. The other one is this email, whatever we are entering, it should be a valid email. If it is not a valid email, it should give an error. Okay. So if I put something like this, it should show an error. But if you put something like this, it should not be an error. But if you put a dot in here, it should be an error. Okay. We'll see how we can do that. The second one, it's going to take validators. So if you have one single validator, you can just call validators.required. Okay, that means this email field is considered as a required field. If you don't provide a value in here, what will happen is it will say this form group is not a valid form group. But say for instance, there can be multiple validators for one single form controller. Not only validators, this is going to be with two validators. What I have to do is I have to define an array of validators. Okay, so validators, again, there, as you can see, these are the validators provided by default. You can use these things. But if you need, you can also create custom validators. Okay, that is a little bit out of the scope, but there is a possibility that you can create custom validators as well for form groups, depending on your value. But we will go with something small. So we have two validators. One is the required validator, one is the email validator. That means the two validators should pass to consider this email controllers to be a valid form controller. Unless you provide the value, unless you provide a valid email, this email controller is considered as invalid. Okay, invalid. So if the controller is invalid, the whole form is considered as invalid. Okay, the form is considered to be an invalid. So we can show that we can get that value whether the form is valid or not. So simple thing that we can do is in the login form group, like value, we can have something called valid. Okay, so it is going to return true or false whether this form group is valid or not. Okay, so I'll just bind it here so you guys can see. After the login, I will just add a dummy value here. Let's say h3 valid form, and I will just simply say form group, login form group is valid. So what will happen is what will happen in here is it will display valid form. If the form group is valid, it's going to say true. Right now it is true, but if it is not valid, the form group will be invalid, or it's going to be false. Right now we have done all the requirement. We have done all the requirement. Now you guys can see I remove the initial value to be null. That means one of the validators is getting failed. That is the required validator. The valid required is not fulfilling because we do not have a value in here. So the whole form is considered to be false. You can check the form controller as well if you like. So like we use form group valid, we have the email controller valid as well. Okay, so right now I will copy this one once more time, and I will say email ctrl, is it valid, and login form group valid. So we have a few things in here. Okay, so first thing is just remove the login form for simplicity. So valid form, it is false because email controller is not valid as well. Let me put valid in here so you guys do not get confused. Okay. Form valid, it is false. Email controller valid, it is also false. Because email controller have two validators. One is the required validator, the other one is the email validator. So both of these validators are not satisfied. Email is not provided with a value, and email is not an email that you will see in here. So if I put some details in here, let's say run, still you can see that form is false. Validator, email controller, it's still false. Why? One validator passed, the required validator is no longer there, but the email validator is failing. So email, these two should be, if you have defined two, both of these validators should be true in order to consider the form control as valid. Okay, either one of these fails, it will not work. So make sure these two validators are valid in order to consider this form control as valid. So the next thing that we can do, you can automatically see that the Angular material frameworks gives you a red outline in here. That's mentioning, okay, this is not valid. That's why it is highlighted in red to indicate the user this is not a valid form. Okay, let me add a value in here, a valid email, randika@mail. Okay, so now you guys can see the form is valid and the email controller itself, it is valid too. Let me make it more bigger. Just realize that, and let me make the CSS not too align center, but let's start. So I can move it up a little bit. Okay. So now you guys can see the form is valid. Okay, the form is valid. No, sorry, now it's reset because I typed in. Let me put something in here. Run the curve. Still, it is invalid at mail. Now you guys can see the form is valid because email controller is valid and the form get valid as well. Okay, so if I put a dot in here, now you guys can see the email controller get immediately false. Why? Because this is not a valid email, even though the required is filled up. This is not a valid email address. Okay, you can't have a dot at the end. You need to have a suffix like .com, .lk, whatever you like. Okay, whatever the top domain should be provided. So hrandika@mail.lk, it works. So this email controller is valid, so makes the form valid. Okay, so this is how validation works, and there are nice things that we can do with these validations. Now, if you see a small one, since this is false one, if I try to go to the next one, it's the Angular material framework. It's automatically highlight this in red, but it doesn't give you a good indication why this is wrong. Okay, user can get confused. Okay, I have input something with it is why it is wrong. We can give a message on it. Okay, this is wrong. This is not valid because of this reason. So in order to do that, we can use material input error sections. Okay, material input, and they have something called mat errors. This input with error messages. If I look it in here, there is this something called mat error. You guys can see there can be two error messages. I will go and grab those two, put it in right around this form controller itself. Okay, so what we have done is here we have something called mat errors, and it is showing these errors. So we can do that by simply calling email controller has error email, and I am not going to go with the required one. Has error email, quotation, has error form controller, has error required. Okay, so I have two different errors. One is first mat error. The second one is required related mat error. So we have this controller. We can access this controller. Whenever a validation fails, it's gonna trigger something called has error. This controller has error method is triggered. So if I say email controller has error and it is containing the email, that means if the email validations goes wrong, this email controller has an error called email. Okay, you can name by default, this is the same as the name of the control itself. You can have custom ones if you like, but for now, since we are using the built-in ones, it has the error email. Okay, email controller has an error called email. If this is true, okay, if the error is true, you can see we are using NGXS directive. That means if email controller has the error called email, then this will be true and this mat error will be shown. Okay, the next thing, if the email control has the error called required, this statement becomes true and this mat error will be shown. Okay, let's go in here, and if I click in here and if I focus out, what will happen is email is required. Okay, so if when I focus out, it automatically triggers the error detection, and it is saying email is required. Okay, and if I put some values here, okay, now you can see please enter a valid email address, because when I'm typing in, it is showing, since this is not a valid email, this is showing run the ad. You can see if I type in a valid email, it shows, but if I again invalidate it, it shows an invalidate message. Okay, so you can do this HASD at a, this is a valid email, no errors will be shown. If I say dot, please enter a valid email. Okay, so we can show error messages based on our errors. We can even look at these errors. As I mentioned earlier, email controller has error will return whether the error is there or not. We can see all the errors if you like. So email controller, there is a there is a property called errors, okay, which will show all the errors. Right now, this is an object. Okay, this is an object, so it won't be displayed correctly. Okay, for now I will do valid here, and I will create a simple p tag, and within this p tag I will try to show errors. Okay, so now you guys can see I want to bind all the errors to this p tag email controller errors. Right now it is showing object. That's because errors is considered as an object in here. Okay, it's not gonna print the object unless it is like given more details. So in Angular we have something called pipes. Okay, so if I use this built-in pipe called JSON, what will happen is whatever the value that you will see in here, the object, it will take in and it will convert to a JSON and show it in here. Now you guys can see the email controller have some errors, and that error object contains required true object. Okay, that's why it is showing. So whenever we are controlling has error, it will return this key required. You can see the required key is in here, and it will return this value, true value. Okay, that's why it is showing the required true and has error to be true as well. Now, if I type in here, now you guys can see the email controller has the errors object, and that errors object have a key called email, which we are using in here. So email controller has error, will return, will check for email, which is this one in here. And since the value is true, the error is shown in here. Okay, so it's really simple. We can see the errors, we can check for the errors, and based on the errors, we can just show the error message. Okay, now for now I will just remove these things. I don't want to show the errors to the user. That's for debugging and for your knowledge. And the email controller, it is valid. Yes, I don't need this. Form is valid. I don't need this as well. I just need this login to be back. Okay, so I can do another thing. I can stop user from interacting with the login unless, now if I click login, now you guys can see the in the component, if I say value, and if I hit button again and again, even though these are null, this is required, this is password, I can perform this action. This action is performable. So what I can do is I can prevent that. I can say, unless this form is valid, let's disable this login. Okay, login button actually. So what I can do is the button right now we are what we are having has no way of disabling these things. We can simply use this disabled option, and if I say disable, it will disable unconditionally. Okay, no matter what you do, whether it is valid or not, this is be disabled. Right now, what we need to do is disable only if the form is not valid. If the form is not valid, we can disable. So we can do the binding in here using brackets, and I will say form group, login form group valid. Okay, so if the form group is valid, then it is disabled. Okay, that is not what we want. We want, if the form group is not valid, let's disable this thing. Okay, so we have the disable button bind to a logic. If the login form is valid and it is not, that means not valid, let's disable the button. Okay, now you guys can see it is disabled by default because this is the form is not valid. So if I say run decker, it is still not valid. Why? We do not have a valid form. And if I say mail in here, now you guys can see as soon as the form group get valid, this button get valid. Okay, now you guys can see as soon as the email got valid, there are no other form controllers which has validators, and the form get valid. As soon as get valid, form group valid not becomes true, and the disable goes away. Okay, you guys can get the logic in here. As soon as the form group is not valid, disable will not happen. Simple. So you guys can see that it's enabled by default, but most probably when we are logging in, okay, most probably when you are logging in, a password is also going to be a required thing, right? If the password is not there, you can't like authenticate the user. So we might need to make the password form controller as required as well. Okay, so anyone in here can give me the hint or give me the section of code I need to make the password validator to be required? Anyone in the audience, please? How do I make the form password form controller validator to have required as well? Anyone? Bhagya, any idea?
No, sir.
Okay, Netmini, how we can make the password validator password also required? Netmini? Krisha?
I think, sir, within the password new form control brackets, you can add null command validators required, I think.
Validators required, like this.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's totally okay, fine. Let's say Randika at Hotmail. Okay, now the email is valid, not showing anything. The password, I haven't put anything. Let's type it something. Yes. As soon as you type in the password, the button gets valid because the form get validated itself. So earlier we had only email, now we have password. So the form controller has 3 validators to pass, 2 for the email, 1 for the password. When all of these validators get passed, the form controller, the form group considered as valid. Okay, as soon as you put something in here, and you can hit the login button. Okay, great. Thank you, Krishan. So so you guys can see that we can do small validations. We can create validations using the built-in validators. Also, as I mentioned earlier, you can create your own custom validators as well. Okay, these are like very small ones. You can have like the password. Say, like for example, the password should have minimum length of 2. Okay, a password we consider a strong password to be let's say at least 3 characters are required. I can do is I can say in here there is a built-in validator so that there is min length that means minimum length, okay, min length should be 3. What it does is the password control, the password form controller first check whether it is required. That means at least one should be there. And on the next hand, the validator is gonna check for minimum length of 3. That means if you don't have 3 characters in here, it is also considered as invalid. Okay, let me demonstrate. So I have run the at Hotmail. Okay, it's not showing an error. That means it is valid. Even though I type in a one single character, it's not 2 characters, not, but if I hit 3, you guys can see it is getting activated. So this, all 4 validators are now satisfied. Then this form group became valid. That's why this login button is getting activated. Now, if I hit login, you guys can see it's run the password is 123. Okay. So there is endless possibilities of having validators, and I'm not going to talk. There is something called asynchronous validators. These, what we call these validators, are synchronous validators. There is the concept of asynchronous validators, which is like running on the background. For example, say for example, when we are creating a sign-in form, when the sign-in happens, we need to make sure the email is not already taken. Okay, the email is not already taken. So we can go to the backend and check, okay, or is this email already taken by someone else? If already this is taken from by another user, we can say, okay, this email is not valid, or email is taken by someone else. So that should involve some background things to happen, some network calls to be done, some queries to be executed, AJAX calls, or whatever the calls that we need to do. It's not going to be instant. This is not going to be based on whatever the values that the user provide at that moment. Not going to be easy because we need some other data to be fetched. So those kind of validation cannot be achieved from synchronous validators like these validators we have. So we need to use something called asynchronous validators to achieve such a thing. Okay, but I'm not gonna go into asynchronous validation at this moment. It's gonna take me another course to explain those things, because we in a sprint of code. I will not teach you guys everything, but I will give you the hint, so you guys can take a look at if you need that requirement within your project. Okay, so we have the basic requirement. For simplicity, from now on, to make all these validators pass, I will have a hard-coded value in here. Otherwise, I will have type in always also that put the hash. Passcode. So to make it more secure, otherwise Chrome is gonna tell me, okay, your password is not that strong, and so on and so forth. So I just log in, and you guys can see it's gonna give the values which is binded to this form. Okay, any questions from this? You guys have any questions with these binding form validations and the parts that we did as of now? Do you guys have any questions?
So why don't we put the controllers and form groups in the constructor?
Yeah, you can do that. But I find myself these variables, these are variables. You can define these things in the field as well. But if you like, you can define these things like this. Let me give you an example. I will do the form controller like this. Okay, sorry. So I can define, this is going to be a form control. Yes. Now it's going to complain that it is not initialized. So I can say this dot email control and like this. We can do like this, but again, then the login form group will give us some errors. So I need to fix that as well. This is going to be a form group as well. And it's need to be login form group. Yeah, this is also possible. This is something that you can do. Either way, it's correct. You can use the either in the constructor or in the field definition in here as well. There is no limitation why you should not do or you should do. Just the thing is, I like to do that way. But if you like to go in the constructor level, that is also working. No issues. Good one. Okay. Anything else, guys? This is just a choice of matter. Okay. I'll define it here, or you can define it in here, whatever you like. Yes. Okay. Anything else? So as I mentioned, you guys need to play with the validators itself. I'm not going to go with all the validators, all the things, all the possibilities that you can do. It's up to you. I just lay around the basics, lay around what you guys need to get started and where you guys can get stuck and where you will probably unsolve these things. And the rest is up to you. Okay. All right. I hope that makes more sense. All right. So we will move. We will move into more UI stuff today. Then we will do some more form exercises as we'll go today. And later on, we will do some logic behind these things, especially the state management and these emails and password. We should send it to a backend, then validate it, and once we have validated it, we have to show some things, and it's going to be a little bit complicated with the logic binding, how we can interact with the backend server, and so on and so forth. For now, we will just stick to UI stuff, and once we are comfortable enough, once we are good enough to move on to backend stuff, where we do API call, where you do API bindings, and we will look into that in a later on lecture. Okay, for now, let's do some more UI stuff and get to know Angular material as well as the other things. Okay, let's assume right now we don't have any security in here. I can just click login and it will go to admin, but this will be changed in the future. Unless you are authenticated, you are not going to go to the admin section. Even the path is not going to be loaded. We have something called guards, and we have some things which will help us with HTTP connections. Let's keep it simple for now, and let's move on our next lecture. Okay. So the requirement we will focus on what the requirement is for now. I will main focus of this section is going to be to introduce you guys into more of this stuff with related to Angular material or UI bindings at least. So the admin component and there's going to be like things like what do you call lazy routes or something like that, or lazy components. I will teach you guys each and every things in this section. So the requirement for my application is that it is an inventory management, like a small inventory management, where it has few things. We need to check the stock. Okay, whatever the stock that is available, we need to check that stock. And next thing I need to do is enter daily stock. Okay, whenever we are working with the stock management, we need a way to enter the stock. The other thing is we need to track the good received, what we call GRN, good received note. When we are making something, we need to make sure we get the input, we stock that, or we manage the stock, and we send it out. Okay, so three main components, I would say. We need a way to get the stock. We need a way to enter the stock, and the next thing is the output. Okay, so we have three different functionalities, three different sections of our application, which I would like to have in three tabs. Okay, I can use since I do not have a mock-up design with me. Most probably when you are working with a group, a huge project with other people, you will get a mock-up, but the mock-up right now is in my head. So I will just go ahead and draw the picture that I have in my head in here. So basically, thing I would like to do is I would like to have three different tabs on the top to manage those functionalities that I have described. So Angular material comes with good components on that, especially with the tabs. There is one component called tag. That's the first, second, third. So this is going to be something repetitive that we're going to do, but it is good. So you guys get the experience on how we can do. So first, second, third, these are the tabs that I'm interested in. So how do I get these things? I need to have this mat tab group. I will copy that. I will paste it in here. As soon as you do, you guys get the error. The mat tab group is not a known element. These elements are not known. So how we can fix that? We need to make sure that admin components know about mat tab group components or mat tab group elements. The best way that we can do is import the group. So if you go to the API section in here, you will see the import statement. You will paste it in here and make sure to include this in the imports. Okay. Once you have these in import, now you get three tabs in here: first, second, and third. So the content, the label that you see it in here, it is the representation of this, and the content that you see in here, it is the representation of content one. So I have three different sections. One is the what I would like to call GRN, or good receive note. Okay, where whenever people coming in, they will give their details on what are the inputs that we get, and the second set will be the stock keeping of these things, and the third one would be what is the current stock of this. So the first, rather than calling it first, I will say GRN, that stands for good receive note. The second one, I would say inputs, or we can say daily stocks. The third one would be the dashboard. What is the current state of should be daily, right? Okay, so we have three functionalities that we need to build: the GRN, the daily stocks, and the dashboard. Okay, so these things, whatever the order, so I'm just building these things up in my mind. But let's have these things come to life. So simple thing, we created three tabs using the material tabs. Make sure you import these things, otherwise it won't work. Okay, now we will go into go into a section where we can put everything related to GRN in this content one. Okay, content one is the GRN related stuff. I can put it in there. Daily stock related things, I can put it in here, and so goes to the dashboard as well. So what will happen if I put everything in here is that it's not gonna be good in terms of managing the code. Okay, the code management for any application should be smaller components as much as possible. By that way, you will get a very small chunk of code where you can manage these things really easily. Okay. For example, as I see this requirement, the main thing that I need to do is GN related, daily stock related, and dashboard related things should be within their own components. In that way, I can manage this component really fairly easily. Okay, so what I will do is I will first create the GRN, good receive not related stuff first. Okay, so in that scenario, I won't be focusing on other things. I will create a small component for that. So how are I going to do that? It's really simple. I'm gonna manage these things under the admin because it is something related to admin only. But if it is something like we need to share, we will create it in a shared view. Right now, we can consider that GRN is something related to the the application itself. So we will create the components within the admin section. Okay. So we do not get we do not search everywhere where the component is. Okay, so I will create a component in here. As you can see, I right click on the admin directory in next generate, and I will search for component, Angular semantic component. The name of this thing, I would always prefix this with the master component. So this is under admin, and admin GRN would make sense. Okay, this is the GRN module under admin. So for instance, there is another module that is coming, which is not under admin, but its name is GRN. To differentiate those two, I would have the prefix of the parent. So in order to see it in a large amount of files, I can see this as a separate thing. So right now, I will go for the more option. I definitely go with CSS, and I will make these standalone. Okay. Created. Now I have. It's always coming under the app, but I will move it to admin. Okay. There should be a bug or something like that. So I have the admin GRN in here. Now, if I want to use this, as I mentioned earlier, we need to import that. Let me close these things. So I can make more room. So in order to work with the admin GRN component, I need to import that, and you guys can see it has this selector prefix with this. And if I put admin component rather than showing content one, I would show admin GRN in here. Now you can see the component admin GRN works will show around in here. So I have put GRN related things within this component, so that makes my life easy. So if I have if I need to make the daily stock also available, what I can do is I can make the daily stock component in here and import it in here and define the daily stock component right around here. The same thing that I have done, but for a different component. The important thing that you guys need to take on this is that whenever we are developing such a small or a large application, always make sure you do not start huge components. The component get huger and huger. The problem is that it's harder to define, harder to debug, and the code, it is like you had to scroll 1,000 pages or something like that. It's not that ideal. Even in React, Angular as well, whatever the framework that you are using, always make smallest components as much as possible. So we can manage the code and reuse if some things in the future. Right now, we don't see any reusability, but as long as you keep these component small and manageable, that is gonna help you guys a lot. Okay, so take the output on that. Take the concept of breaking down these things is very important in an application. Okay, the next thing that we will be discussing is something called communication between these things. Say, for example, I want to give some inputs. I want to give some input to the admin GRN from the med group or the admin component. From the admin component, I need to give something to admin GRN. I need to give some input on that. I need to give some information. I need to pass some information to the admin GRN. So how we gonna do that? Okay, so the simplest term, we have something called inputs. If you go to admin component, admin GRN component, we can define an input for that. Okay, the simplest thing is use the input decorator, and input decorator, the name that we will give for this input decorator, you can leave it empty, or you can use the name itself. Let's say, for example, I want to give the from the admin component to the GRN component, I need to pass a label. Okay, so I will name this as label, and it's going to be a type of string. And the next thing that Angular is going to say, the next thing that it's going to say is that label is not defined. So whenever we are constructing something in the class itself, we need to make sure this label is get initialized. Okay, so when we are initializing something, we need to either give a default value, something like this, or we need to give it within the constructor. So within the constructor, I can say label is something like this. Okay, so this is because of the TypeScript things that we are using. So label should be initialized within the constructor, or when we are instantiating it in the field itself. Okay, this is something we must do. For some reason, let's say we can't give it in the we don't have a default value in this case, so we have to make this variable optional. Optional in the sense the label can be there or cannot be there. Okay, if it is not required, basically. So but for Angular 16 and onwards, they have introduced something called required to true. Okay, so this is something else. This is required true in the sense whenever we are creating the admin GRN component, the label should be provided. Otherwise, it's going to be an error. Okay, should be provided. So in such a case where we have to say the label should be provided, we are using this, what do you call this mark? What is this mark actually? I can't remember. In single, I know. Can anyone help me with this? It was in my mind. Not the question mark. what is this mark called? Meaning. The not mark, I would say. Okay, as programmers, I will call this not mark. So by annotating with this exclamation, thank you. So by having the exclamation mark, which we say, okay, this is required. Okay, this is not something you can ignore when you are creating. If you want this label to be marked, you have to have a value. Then we have the exclamation mark. But if this is optional, you can have this question mark. But this is something different. This is something Angular does. So the Angular says this input is required true, then the value should be here. If I say false, this input is not required, then we have to make it optional in here. So these are two different things. One for Angular, this required true is something Angular needs, and this question mark and exclamation mark, those are for TypeScript. Okay, don't get confused. You have to do the choice very carefully. So if it is required false, it can be optional, that is right. But if this is a required one, and the Angular should have required as well, you can either this like emit this, or you can have like without showing anything. You guys can see that it is not showing an error, but as soon as you put this is required, when we put it required, the compiler at runtime, it says, okay, there is something wrong. This is required, but you haven't provided. So if I go to the admin component, it says required input label must be specified. Okay, then we need to provide a label like this, and I will say label is grn. Okay, I'll just put grn as the label. It's not grn, it should be, I'll say Randika in this scenario. So if I say Randika in here, the label is required and it is shown. And if I go to the component, it is not showing anything else as well. So if I want to show this label within the HTML itself, of course I can do that. And if I do the normal binding like we do, it's going to show it something like this. Okay. So this is how we communicate with the outside world and the inside. So within the admin component, you have something called a label, which is an input, and you can put it in here. And the name of this should be matching with the input variable name that we have given in here. Say for instance, I want to give this the value, the Randika in here as a variable. Okay, if I want to give it as a variable, what I can do is I will define a variable in here, label grn. Okay, you can name whatever you like. And if I say who is in here, let's say Supuni. Okay, label grn. Now I need to bind this label value, which contains the value Supuni, into my label around here. Okay, so if I want to bind a variable, what I have to do is make it curly braces and the variable name that I want to provide. So it's going to be label grn, and it's basically what it's going to do is it's going to find a variable called label grn. Whatever the value, in this case Supuni, will be passed to the label value, and it is passed down to the component, and component will render around here. Okay, so that's how we pass a variable from its parent. The parent in this scenario is admin component, and the child in this component is the admin grn component. We can pass values either using a variable. If you are using a variable like this, you have to make it curly braces. If you do not want to make a variable something like this, a small variable like this, you can just have this label grn. Now you guys can see If I'm not doing the binding, it's going to take this string literal value and pass it as the label. Okay. So make sure only possible things like string, numbers, those things can be passed like this. But complex objects sort of things, I would definitely go with a variable declaration like we did in here and pass that variable declaration to the component. Okay, so this is how we do communication. We pass a variable from parent to child. Okay, we can do the other way around as well. We can do some things. We can do parent from child to parent as well. So I'll leave that up to you guys to do. Okay, but the way that we're going to do is it's called output. Okay, we have input, we have output. Okay. So outputs are considered as way of communicating back to the parent. How you're gonna do communication back. So it's gonna use something called, let's say, update, and we will say I will have something called event emitter. Okay, Angular from Angular core. Make sure you're getting it from the Angular core, and whatever the type that you want to emit, and I will emit a string or something like that. Using this update, I can communicate back to the I can communicate back with the parent itself. Okay, that's up to you right now. The way that you have to do is using output. This is the syntax. Please explore on your own time how we can communicate back with the parent. This is input, how you communicate from the parent. This is how you communicate back to your parents. Okay. All right. Any questions up until this? How we communicate with underlying component in this scenario? So we talked about small components. When we divide these components, we need a way to communicate. The communication way is done by input and output. So there you have it. So you guys know how to communicate with the outside world, at least with the parent and child. The parent is admin component and the child is admin GRN. Now we have a way of communicating via input and output with the parent and the child. Okay. Any questions up until this? Okay, so this is something that we call a basic parent to child communication. Okay, the parent is visible. Yes, parent is the admin group, and the child is visible. The admin GRN. They have a one-to-one connection. They can talk to each other. But what if I want to talk to the app component? In here, I have a route outlet in here. I need to communicate from GRN component. Whatever if I do something in here, I need to reflect that output. I need to communicate with the app component that I am working in here. Okay, I need to do something in here. I will perform some action in here that will reflect on the app component itself. For example, the app component will have a loading screen. Okay, in here we have loading. We will have something like a loading screen. And if I click on a button in here, if I click on a button in the admin GRN, I need to communicate that, okay, now show that login screen. Now show that loading screen. That kind of things, how we can do. Okay, there is no direct communication. You don't have admin component in here. Admin component does not have the app component itself, because app component is communicating only via route outlets. Okay, there can be many route outlets. So we don't have a direct connection to admin component, because the admin component is, if you guys can remember, is a lazy loaded module. So when we are lazy loading, whatever the values that we have put in here will be replaced by the router component itself, these lazy loaded ones. And we do not have a way of like communicating with the GRN. GRN have direct communication with app components and the admin component. That's it. We do not have a direct communication with the app component, so we cannot use inputs and outputs in order to communicate with each other. We don't have a way. So in this scenario, input output will not work. Okay, input output will not work. So we need to come up with something else that we can do the communication. Okay, that we need a way to pass information. So there are several ways that we can do. That is something called a service. Okay, a service which is inject to both of these applications, both of these components. So a service in Angular, we can make it what do you call singleton. That means if I create a service and that service is only one service is available for app component as well as the admin GRN component. So since the service is singleton, what will happen is when we use the service in app component and when we use this in the GRN component, the both will have the same instance and the same values can be stored upon both of these places. Okay, let me show you how we can create a service and how we can communicate. Okay, this is one of the way. This is not the recommended way. I would not go ahead with this approach, but this is a way that you can do. But it's gonna make things complicated. But we should know these things. Okay, these things can be done. These things are like possible, but we need to make sure we have better alternatives. And depending on your project, depending on your timeline, maybe you need to change it a little bit up. Okay, so what we will create now is a service. Okay, so most of the time the services that we're going to be creating are going to be shareable. Okay, these things are shareable, and these are considered not wheels but more of a logical places. If you guys can remember from what do you call it, from the mobile application development framework that we did, and Android kind of things, we had the MVVM pattern, right? Where we have the view in one place, we have the view model in one place, and the model in another place. It's kind of similar in here, but we call this MVC in here. So whenever we want to have the views, we have it in the pages, and or you can call this something like the view itself, if you like to call these views. But since it is HTML and web, I call this normal pages, but it's up to you, not written in stone. Since there are things called services, I will create a separate one for services. So these are the places where the view model kind of things are there. Okay, so whenever we want to have some business logic, we will put those things in the service section. Of course, you are not bounded to have everything. You can have everything in the controller, the component as well. You can do logics in here, but I would recommend, or the best practice in a scenario like this, to move all the business logic to services. Okay, that way your code is very clean. You don't have to like worry about when it is coming to things like testing and all. So I have a folder called directory called service, and this is gonna be replaced later on. So I'm gonna call this as app service. Okay, so it's gonna be the naming of the choice is because the app means this service is responsible for application level things. Okay, anything to do with app, we will use the app service. Okay, anything to do with grn, we can have a grn service. Anything to do with admin, we can use admin service. So anything to do with app, I will use the app service. Okay, so I have created the directory called app service app. Now I need to create a service. Right click on the app directory, use nx generate and search here the service. Okay, not a service worker, use the service command. Okay, name the service for you. Okay, you can create service and all those things. Right now I'm gonna create a service in here. I'll just click generate. Hopefully it gets generated in the correct place. No, it not. For some reason the CLI is not working as well. You can see app service is created here. I will move it to app service. Okay, yeah. So I have created a service, simple service called app service. Now, if you look at the app service, this is the test file. We will ignore for that. And this is the service itself. So it containing something called injectable. This is a decorator that we use in Angular. So injectable, and within this indicate, okay, this is a service that can be injected into someone. It can be injected to application, it can be injected to grn, whatever you like. So the next one is really important, the provided in root. That means if for some reason this app service is created once in the application, the whole application the whole application will use this one single instance of that. It will not create app services everywhere. Okay, so provide in root just simply would say it's a singleton. That means this app service, wherever you inject this, we will see how you can inject that. Wherever you inject this, it will be only a one instance with throughout the application. Okay, throughout the application, there will be only one app service instance available. Okay, that is achieved by provide in attribute in here, and it is named to root. Okay, so right now we have a simple service. It's called the app service. Okay, so how do I inject this service in order to communicate with within the both applications? So I have this app component where I need to communicate with admin grn component. Okay, so these are the two places I need to communicate. So I need app component, I need admin grn component. So what I'll do is I will inject the app service in both of these services. So really simple. Angular do injection by using constructors. I will use private. I say app service and the name of the service, app service. As you guys can see, if I put like this, what will happen is app service instance will be injected into the admin. Sorry, in here, where are we? Admin grn component. App service instance is inject to here. Okay, let me do the same in app component. Okay, I need to import these things. There you go. Now we have a common place in the app component as well as the admin grn component, which is called the app service. Okay, so app service is containing the same value for both. Let me show what I mean in here. So let me do a small change in here. So within the app component, I only have this app route outlet. Okay, so what I will do is I will add a loading bar on top of the app route. Okay, how I'm going to do that? So I will search what do you call a progress bar. Okay, yes, I have a progress bar. It is going to be something like this. So I will add this map progress bar in here. Okay, mod I will say indeterminate, and the value I do not want to see any values. As you can see, mat progress bar is not known to app component. We have to import that. Go to imports, and in the component itself, I would import mat progress bar module in here. Okay, I have a mat progress bar indeterminate in here. Now you guys can see that the app route outlet is handling the pages that we see in here, the admin component and all the stuff. The app, whatever we put in the app component, it is common for everyone. So if I remove this, the router will not work. We don't have the router page. And if I enable that, this router page will get replaced by the values we have put in the router, and so on and so forth. Okay, the progress bar goes there. Here it is visible for anything. It does not mind whatever the route outlet is there, whatever the things. It does not mind as long as the progress bar is shown for each and every page. Okay, so we have the progress bar on top, and now what I want to do is based on event that is originated in the GRN, I need to show hide this progress bar. Okay, so what I will do is if I go to app component and app component in here, as well as if I go to app service. Okay, this is the service that we're gonna store the shared tricks. So I want to toggle the share button. So I would have a boolean to that. So I will call this loading. Okay, by default it is false. Okay, I have a variable called loading. By default it is false. Now within the app component, I can access that variable. Okay, I can access that variable. Since this is a privately injected, I can't access these app services in my HTML because this is private. To make it access in the app component, I have to make this protected. Okay, I have made it protected. That means the app service is now available in app component HTML. So I will say ngIf I can say app service dot loading. So this progress bar showing and hiding is done by app service loading value. So by default it is false. Right now what will happen if I save this? It's not gonna show. Why? Because we have made that app service. So we have created that app service, and the app service will have the value loading as false. So I will create a method in here. Let's say toggle loading. Okay, so what this is, it's gonna toggle the loading to the other way around. So if it is loading, it's gonna be not loading. If it is not loading, it's gonna be loading. So it's gonna toggle between the true and false. So we will if we call this toggle loading within the app service, it should trigger this loading to be true or false. Let's see how we can do that within the app GRN component. So we have the app GRN component in here. Okay, so within the GRN component, I will remove these things. I would have a button in here. Okay, I would say a simple button, toggle loading. Okay, I have this toggle loading, but right now let me make it more user appealing by introducing a match button module, and I will put that button in here. Okay, so now it is a little bit okay. So whenever I click on this, I need to toggle that service code. So I need to write click event Now what I have to do is from the GRN component, I can access the app service, and app service I can call the toggle button. So since this is private, I made it protected, so I can access this app service from my HTML component. Otherwise, I can't access that directly. So I can say app service dot, there is this loading variable or the loading toggle loading function. I would call the toggle loading function in here. What happens? That button module, okay. So now what will happen? Let me explain once again. We have these admin GRN component. There is a button called toggle loading. And when we click on that toggle loading, it's go to the app service that we have. And there is a function called toggle loading. It will invoke that. So let's go to the app service in here. And what it does is it's going to toggle the value of loading to the opposite one. That if it is true, it's going to be false. It's going to be false. It is going to be true. So the app service loading variable is listening in here with the app component. If you look at the app component app service, since this is a singleton, both of them are going to be used in accessing the same variable. So it's going to be the same variable. In the app component, we have the app service loading listener put in here. So whenever the app service loading changes, if it is true, the progress bar will show. If it is false, the progress bar will hide. Okay, simple as that. If I click in here, now it is showing. If I click it again, it's going to toggle. So this is a way that we can communicate from the app component to admin GRN. They do not have a direct communication line, but we have created a direct communication line by simply creating a service, a simple service, and calling out this simple service. By both parties, you can communicate with each other. Okay, by communicating, I have shown you. Okay, now whenever I toggle this from the GRN component, this is from the GRN component, and GRN components say app service to toggle this, and the app component is listening to that. App component service is listening to that, and since it is using the loading value in here, it's gonna show and hide on this case. Okay. All right. Any questions where we did this communication between non-related or directly non-related components? So app component is in somewhere else, admin GRN component somewhere else. We have communicated both. We have connected these two using a single service. Okay, this is one way of doing that. You can do that, but I do not recommend this kind of approach unless it's just a small one. In this scenario, if this is the only function that I need, I would not make this complicated rather than this. But from my experience, if I want to make the application, if I want to make this application more enterprise level or more robust, I would definitely go with a state management software. Okay, this is not using any state management software, but I will introduce any state management software and how we can react accordingly. But this is also doable if you are in a hurry, or if you need something very small to be done. This is something that you can do. Okay, I'm not saying you should do. This is something you can do in order to do communication. Any questions up until this section, how we communicate? Simple. We just create a service, and the service is acting as a bridge between two components. You can communicate. Okay, no problems. Anyone needs to be explained this one more time, or are we good? If you need once again explanation, I can do that. Raise your hand, please. Okay, I suppose everybody got the idea. And yeah, so we have this service which communicate, or we have a simple way of communicating like input and output. We have shared service, and next thing that we're going to talk is the state management, how we can do in the next level. Okay, we can do state manipulation. We do not have a service, this kind of service, but it's something similar, but in a more reactive way and more manageable way that we can do this. We will use state management to achieve the same thing, but in a more enterprise, or in a more robust way of doing codes. Okay, this is not bad, but it can be better. Okay. All right. Anyone need 5-minute breaks? Raise your hand, please. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and come back. I will pause the recording. Take a 5 minute, come back. Okay, so we talked about how we can communicate with components which are not related to each other. The other way that we can do is the more how do you say, more good way of doing these things is we're going to do these things in a state management software. So how many of you guys have heard about state management? I'm not asking like in Angular itself, but any other programming language as well. Okay, Marsha has an idea about state management. Others, have you done state management? Any idea? So I don't have any idea about how to do state management. Raise your hand, please. That's weird. So you guys know state management, or you don't know? Please raise your hand if you don't know. I have no idea about state management. Okay. Some have no idea. How about others? Sleeping? Vimuktini, do you have any idea, or you don't have an idea? Hello? I'm just here to listen. Oh, what is the status of you guys? Okay. All right. I assume you guys do not have. Prashant, what is your thing? Do you have an idea or not?
I just came here again. What is the question, sir?
Sorry?
After the break, I just came here.
Okay, sorry. The problem is, I was asking whether you guys know anything about state management in general.
No, sir.
Okay. So I assume most of you guys do not know, but Imash have an idea. Imash, what do you understand by state management?
Yeah, I use Redux in React.
Yes. Yes.
State management is we can manage some component state within that component to another component. So that's the idea I have.
So what sort of things that you commonly find in a state management logic? So if you are using state management, okay, you need to know about these things. What are those things? For example, you have something called effects. Likewise, do you know the components of a state management software?
Set state like that.
Set state is
In Redux, it's called. We can use dispatcher.
yes, dispatchers. Yes.
And
What do you
we-
dispatch?
we can do action.
Yes.
And we
What
have
should happen for the dispatch actions?
dispatch action. We can and dispatch, and we have
We have reducers.
we can use state. Reducers used to update state.
Yes.
We have store.
Store. Yes, we have the store.
Store is the place we store the old state.
All states. Yeah.
Reducer
Right.
used to update the state.
Yes.
Action used to curve the reducer.
Yes, exactly. So Marsha has a good idea on how state management works in general. But for the others, I think I will give a brief introduction. So as Imasha explained, there are a few things that you would expect in a state management software. So those are the things that we discussed: the dispatcher, the actions, the store, the reducers, and so on and so forth. So let me boil down or drill down to each and every component. So think there is a place called a store. Okay, store is where you keep everything related to your state. Okay, the state is what's the current situation of your application. Okay, so for example, the loading of that app component in here, app component, the progress bar. Okay, this progress bar, is it visible or not? That is the state of this progress bar. Okay, this progress bar is visible or not? Did we click on this button or not? Okay, that is the state of the application. Right now, we have a very simple state. The simple state in this scenario is the application, the met progress bar in the app state is showing or not. Okay, so the state either in this scenario, either it is going to be loading variable that is either true or false. Okay, that is the state. Okay, all the status within the application. Okay, there can be multiple status. Okay, progress bar in this scenario, let's say we have a username, a password, whatever those things can be in different states. All these states within the application will be stored somewhere called the store. Okay, all these things will be stored in a place called store. Okay, so state is how it is going to be. Okay, what is the state? What is the current situation over there? And where these things are stored is or how these things are currently in, where we need to have a place to hold these things. Okay, the place is called the store, which will have all the status of the components, all the status of our application. It's not going to be components only, there can be non-components as well. So whatever the states we have in our application, we will store those things, or we will keep those things in a place called store. Okay, so we have state, we have a store. All the states are stored in the store or will be put in the store. So for example, we want to change a state. Okay, we want to change some state. We want to change some state of our application. Say, for example, I want to toggle this loading to true, from true to false. Okay, or from false to true. Or I can, since this is a Boolean, I have only two options, but there can be many. Okay, so I need to change a state. Okay, I need to change the state. In this scenario, I will take the example of changing the state of this loading. If I want to change the state of this loading, there are two things I need to do. First, of course, it's going to be keep it in the store. So I need to say to that store, hey, change this loading value to whatever the value that I give. Okay, I need to say it. I need to say it. So what we are doing is we are giving an action. Okay, by using an action, we can change the state of our application. Okay, we will say change the loading to true, change the loading to false, change the username to Randika, change the username to Nuan. Whatever you want, whatever you know, whatever you need to do, you have to execute an action. You need to do an action in order to change the state. The only way that we should do is by only executing state to change, executing action to change the state. Okay, so we have states, we have store, we have action. By executing actions, we change the state. Okay, that changed, whatever the change that happened will be stored in the store. Okay, so we have actions, we have stores, we have state, and the actions, the execution of action is done. Okay, the action is only a carrier. It's like the messenger. We should do this, we should do that, that's it. But in order to execute an action, we need to use something called a dispatcher. Okay, the dispatcher is the person, or dispatcher is the component which will execute actions, or which will launch the actions, and based on that launch actions, the state will change. Okay, so we have dispatchers which will execute some action, where action will be sent to the state management. The state management will detect, okay, this action has been changed, this action has been dispatched. Based on this action, I need to change the state, and the state will be changed. Okay, so the other way around this is when we are executing the state changes, when we are doing these state changes, there will be interested parties who is listening to that changes. Okay, so we have a store which contain all the states, and within that state, we will expose the state to other people where they can listen in. Okay, they can listen into those state changes. We call those things in here. In different languages, in different frameworks, we use different namings. So most of the time we call these things as selectors. Okay, we select a special section of that code, and we if there are any changes happening to that state, the selector will inform, hey, now that state where you were listening has changed. Whatever you want to do that. Okay, so we have selectors to listen to your changes, whatever the changes that you are doing, and by using these selectors, you can react to the state changes. Okay, we will see these things action. Just have an idea on these things. As of now, we will introduce these things in Angular, and we will talk about these things in more detail. Okay, so remember the concept. We have actions, we have dispatchers, we have state, we have store, we have selectors. Okay, these 5 things at least you should know. Then we can do more reactive programming, reactive way of interacting with these things. Okay, how much the application get complicated, the state management can make it more simple. So by simply introducing the state into our application, most of the complex application will get even more complex, but on the long run, what will happen is it will make things really easy. Okay, let us explain in this example that we see in here. We will convert this into a state managed thing, rather than we are sharing these values via a service. Okay, so the state management software, it can be changed. It has different names. So in Angular, we have state management libraries not built into the framework itself. Of course, you can create something similar, but it's easy to use some library out there. There are popular options like NGRX and NGXS. Okay, NGRX and NGXS. You can use whatever you like, but in my opinion, I find NGXS more easy to use. Okay, NGRX is also the same concepts are going. You can use those things, but it's up to you. NGXS I find more easy to use and less complicated. These concepts that we have talked about, it's clearly you guys can see those things and really easily you can execute those things. So we will use NGXS in our course. But if you are from React world, React have these things in these frameworks as well. If you have time, we will look at it. If not, just in case, the Redux is one of the most popular state management software. So you can use Redux. That's Recoil, and there are a lot of options out there. You can use those things as it's suited for you. Okay. For now, we will use NGXS. Let's go to NGXS. NGXS. So getting started, it's going to be really easy. Installation. What I can do is have npm install ngx store, and I will use the save command. I will use that. Open my terminal. Okay. So I'm installing NGXS. NGXS, if you want the concepts to be covered, there is this introduction. If you are really new and you can't understand what we are talking about, you can see these things. There's the store, there's the action, there's the dispatch, select, mutations and everything. You get the concepts in here. Okay, these are like the basic concept. You can store an action. If you guys miss something, you can always definitely come back in here and have a look around it. Okay, so I'll go with, if you guys see why, what is its the purpose and the installation. Its installation is really simple. So first thing we need to do is we need to create a state. Okay, we need to create a state in order to work that. So to instantiate, I will use this NGXS module. Make sure this is in the app module. Okay, it's saying app module, but let's see, we will come into a trouble in here. So as we are using what do you call a single we are not using app module, but we are using what was that name again? Standalone components. Since we are using standalone components, we won't find this app module in our application. So what we have to do is, if something, this is something that you might encounter for other things as well. They will say, okay, go and register something in app module, but the app module is not to be found. We are directly involving with the app component. Okay, this is like the starting point for us. So if such a thing comes in, go to the main.js. So where is that? Bootstrap. It should be yeah. Oh, you can use the app route in here, but I would definitely go with the main.ts. In here, you might need to do some changes, and we will see how we can get around that. Okay, this is only if you are using the latest version, because we are in the middle of changing from standalone component to the module-based component to standalone. The documentation you will find in here will be like a little bit outdated. So in this scenario, this is the way that we can mitigate this. Let me check the code snippet. I have it in here. Where is that? Okay, give me a second, guys. I'll open that. So right, we are working in here. Okay. Okay, so in here, the main app component, we have this something called app config. There you go. This is the place that we want to define. Okay, the configuration. Let me make it more. Okay, now you guys can see. So this is where we provide such a thing when we are using standalone components. This is the old way and this is the new way. So what you have to do is import providers from. Okay, we have to use something called import providers from, and we will just import the module just like this. It's going to be the same. The import section is going to be same, but the way we're doing is it's a little bit different. Import providers from, it's from the Angular core, and I will not have initial state. I will add import from ng store. I need to have the environment. I will say what's this environment variable in a bit. I'll have environment in here. And I think environment is not here. Okay, I don't need environment right now. I will say development mode true. Okay, so I have introduced the NGXS to our application. As I mentioned earlier, the documentation shows the old way. This is the new way when we are using standalone components. Import providers from, and we have to give the variable definition in here, just like this. It's going to be the same thing. No worries on here. So NGXS module for root, and there is the empty brackets. We will say what this is. And there is one thing that we call this development mode. Okay. Development mode is something indication that we are in this, we are using development features in order to do this, but in production, we need to make this false. Okay. So in development mode, there are such things that we'll expose by the NGXS module to makes things easy. We'll see in a little bit, but for now, we'll just say true. So we have introduced NGXS module from the root. And in here, you guys will see that empty array. Okay, in here, what we will do is we will define the state. From the application level, if you want all the application to have a state, we will define the application level state in here. Okay, we will see how we can do feature level state as well. So to give an idea on why we need to separate these things, sometimes I think the application is really huge. Application is getting really big. And as I mentioned earlier, the store, which contains all these things, will grow exponentially because all the states related to these things will come and register. Okay. So for example, application level, login, admin, site, whatever the states, there can be thousands of states. All those things can get registered. Some even are not necessary at the beginning. Okay, so we can, like we did lazy loading the components, we can lazy load the states as well. Okay, we can lazy load the states. So if we need a separate state for admin, we can have that separate state. Only when the admin module is loading, admin state is loading, and the related things will be put in the store. Okay, let me repeat again. So when we have huge application, the state become huge as well. Okay, this is the state is something we consider a global or something that can be local. For example, all the application have some states that need to be shared throughout the application. It doesn't matter where you are. It can be shared throughout the application. For example, an access token, a username, whatever, those kind of things are global things. But there are certain states that might need only for this admin section, only for this login section. So rather than loading all those things in one single state, what we can do is we can minify the states as we like. Okay, so we can have an admin state differently, login state differently. So only login have the value of login state, only admin have the admin state. Likewise, when we do that, it reduces the loading time, it's reduced the store capacity, and so on and so forth. So it makes things easier for us to manage the state. But for some reason, if we need something, a global state, we will need to create a global state for sure. So I will create a global state because something like loading, something like the username, we will probably end up putting those in a global state. But it is only if you want. If you don't need, you can have it in local state as well. For introduction, I will create a state. Okay, in here I will create a new folder called state. Okay, and I will create the state as name appears. It's going to be app state, since it is going to be it's going to be throughout the app. And I will create two files here, app.actions.ts and app.state.ts. I have seen some plugins where you can like generate these things as well, like we did the generation of component and services, but I think I have not installed those things. There is a CLI tool that you can use, but for now I'm not going to use that. I will just create two files and go wrong. Okay, so I have created something called the app state. Okay, it is going to be a service. Let me show you the state definition. It is going to be something like this. So app state model. These things removed. Okay, so this is a simple state definition. Okay, so we need to have it as a service. You can see from the injectable decoration, and it is provided in root. That is fine. And the name of the state is called app state, and we need to model the state. Model the state in the sense, what are the values that we're going to be providing, we will be keeping in this state? What are the values that we're going to store in this? We're going to store. So in app state, we will have something called loading, and it's a type of Boolean. Okay, so we will model in different class, so it's easy for us to manage. And for example, we need email to be put in our state. So I will make it as a string. And say, for instance, throughout the global through the application, we need to store something like a token, access token. Let's say token. Okay, we can create something like this, and make sure if the loading is necessary, to have it in the interface like this. If it is not necessary at the beginning, we can make those things optional. Okay, so we declare a state, and the state's going to be shaped like the app state model, the interface that we have declared in here. And the other things that we need to do is give a name for the state to differentiate from the others. We will see why the naming is important. So we have the state called app, and the defaults values what we need to show. So defaults value for this app state, if it is loading, it's going to be false. Since it is required, we have to give. If it is not required, optionally we can put default value email as hotmail.com. Okay, since this is optional, I can give it or not the default value. So whenever the apps, whenever the state's created, the loading will be false, email will be hotmail.com. Okay, so these things are these defaults are what we will see, that where you can use the application to have the default state. Okay, whenever the values, whenever no one has given any values, this is the value state that we're going to have. Okay, this is the initial state of our application. Okay, and the next thing that I need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the state definition. I now need to go and register this app state in our configuration for the root variable. That means for this application, we will use this app state for the whole application. Okay, within the application itself, we will have this app state throughout the application. Wherever you look, you will have access to app state. Okay, we will see how it goes. Right now in the configuration, we will put this app state there. So we have the app state. It can contain variables, states like loading, email, or token. Now the state is defined. Okay, this is the shape of your state. This is how app state is going to look like. So we have configured few things. The things we have talked about. We have initiated the store and the state. So the state is here. The store is going to be something, all those things binded together. Okay, so we have a state. Now what we need to do is we need to say manipulation of this. We need to manipulate and say change the loading, change the email, change the token. Okay, we need to say, we need to have actions for these things. We need to have actions on this. So how are we going to define actions? That's why we have this app action section. All right, and we will have actions defined like this. This is a typical action. Okay, these are the typical action that we're going to do. So we have an action called show loading. Okay, and this is something neat in order to differentiate the type of the action. So it's always going to be public static read only type. And in here, for differentiating actions from other actions, we put these things in the state name. In here it is app. You can use simple app as well, but I like to keep a little bit nice and give it a name. Okay, this is optional, but in order to say show loading in app state, we can use the same name. Okay, because a show loading can be defined in another state. That is also possible. To differentiate, always the action that we are supposed to execute, make sure you have this prefix with the state name as well. So show loading is something belong to app. So I will define it there. So the next one is the name of the class itself. What is the action that you will be executing? Okay, this is a way of defining a unique type for this action. Okay, the actions cannot have the same name or same type. It will conflict. Okay, to make things unique, what we do is we use the app state name for the first thing and the class name itself to make it more unique, so it won't collide. The next thing is the constructor. The class constructor contains what are the actions values, what are the things by using this action we're gonna do. Okay, so show loading should have a true or false value. By executing this action show loading, you need to provide whether it is loading or not, whether it's the loading value is true or false. So this is the action that we can be performing, and this to perform this action, these parameters, these variables are needed. Okay, so this is a simple definition of action, show loading. Now this is the action that we have defined. We need to do the next thing is within the state, if somebody execute this action, how the state should change. It is defined in here. So in order to do that, we call these things as reducers in other frameworks. In order to do that, it's a really simple thing that we have to do. We have the action annotation, something like this. Okay, so we have the action annotation, and we have to say on what action, the show loading action. If somebody execute the show loading action, this action, this method will be executed. Okay, this method will be executed. So we have the action show loading, and if somebody execute the show loading action, this method or this function will be executed. Okay, this is the simplest form. So there are a few things that we need to do in this method. The method name is, normally we put it as the same as the action to avoid conflicts. You can have X or Y, but it's easy to, as long as it's just a method, that's fine. So there are a few things that we will get out of this. First one is the context. That means the current state of this action, or what is the current state of this action, and the action itself. The show loading is the action that we will be getting, and we can have the action instance in here. And whatever the value manipulation that we need to do should happen in here. So basically what we are doing is, if somebody execute the show loading, what will happen? This method will get executed, and the state context that we find in here have different things, different way of manipulating the state. Now we need to change the state. Okay, by executing an action, we are trying to do is to change the state. So to change the state, these state contexts provide us few methods. There is patch state, there is set state, and if you want to get the current state, we have get state. Likewise, we have different way of doing some changes to the state. And while we are doing that, the action itself give us some valuable information, or the action constructor, we can access that as well. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to patch the state. So patch the state in the sense, I will only change the state variables that I am interested in. Okay, using the patch state method, I can only update the loading. I can only update the email. I can only update the token. But if you use something like set state, this state manipulation command, you have to give, okay, if I'm setting the state, loading should be this, email should be this, and token should be this. Okay, so if you are setting, you have to give all the state variables. But if you are patching, you can only give 1 or 2 or whatever the amount of things that you like. So right now, while I'm executing the show loading action, I do not want to touch anything to the email or token. I just interested in the loading action. So what I will say, patch the state with the loading. Okay, so this is like a really compact version, but let me give you guys the longer version as well. So these things will be something like, for most of the familiarity, let's use this as ctx context, and this will be something like action. Okay, so most of the time you guys are familiar with these kind of syntax, the ctx and the action. And if I want to patch the state, within the ctx you will find a patch state method, and within the patch state method, okay, what I'm going to patch the loading. Okay, to make the, what is the value that I'm going to patch with the loading. Okay, I'm going to patch the loading state. Okay, what is the value? The value is, which is coming from the action dot loading. Okay, the action has a variable called loading. If you guys go here, and you can see in the constructor, you have a variable called loading. So that is the value that I'm going to patch. So I am saying I will patch the state. This is the state right now. And the value that I'm interested in patching, value I'm interested in changing is the loading. And the loading should have whatever the action we are executing, it will have something called loading. I will have that and put it in here. Okay, so I am only changing the loading action at this point. So this is like the normally what you will see. So to make things easy, or it's depending on you, we can use destructive constructors in here, destructive methods in here. So rather than saying state patch state, I can simply destruct this and say patch state. So I don't need to use context directly. I can say patch state. Show loading can have multiple variables. In here only we have this one variable in here. So I can destructive it here and extract loading in here. Okay, so I don't need action in here, right? And the next thing that I got to do, since the variable names are same in TypeScript, you can omit by having the same name twice. So if this is the key is loading, the value is loading, you can have one single one like this. So it is loaded. So altogether, at the end, it is coming something like this. Okay, this is optional. You can have, if you are not fond of this destructive methods, you can always use the other way. But if you like destructive ones like this, you can have that as well. Okay, so we have defined an action, and when the action is executed, okay, whenever somebody execute this action, this should happen. In here, simply we are patching the state, we are changing the state, only the loading variable or the only loading state we will be changing. We are not touching anything else. Anything else, as it was, will be there. We are only changing the loading one. Okay, so we have changed the state. We have defined action and we have changed the state. Okay, so we have actions, we have defined an action, we have defined a reducer. We call these things as reducers. This is where the action comes in and we are reacting on that. Okay, this is where the action is get executed. So in React, you will have something like a reducer function and you will have a switch kind of thing. Imasha, I think, can agree with me. But in TypeScript, we can use way more sophisticated like this because it's easy. If there are like 100 actions to be handled, you have 100 switch case. But in here, you can have like 100 methods. So it's easy to manage from my end, as I see. Even we can have this into 2 different classes and handle those things. That kind of things are available. But if you are using a switch case, it's a little bit hard to manage. But in here, you will find it is easy to manage when an action is executed. Okay, now the other thing is selector. Okay, so anytime this loading is changed, anytime this loading action is the state of the loading is changed, somebody should listen to this. Okay, anybody who is interested in the state of loading should listen to this. So to listen to those things, they have to select either all of the app state, or they can only listen to the loading changes. So as you can see in here, we are only changing the loading state. Okay, so we don't need everybody to listen to all the app status, but within the app state, if somebody change only loading, we can listen to that. So to do that, we have something called selector like this. We are defining a selector. It's going to be a static, and it's normally what I do is name the same as the state that I'm interested in. In here, I'm interested in loading, and I will get the full state. Yes, if I am getting the full state in here, but I am interested in only state.loading. Okay, So if I am interested in the full state, I can have something like this. But if I am interested on only the loading section, this is I can narrow it down to the loading section. So this is where we change the state, and this is where we listen to these changes. Okay, somebody can execute this. Somebody can execute the action or dispatch the action, and when it is dispatched, the state changes. And if somebody is listening to the state from somewhere else, you can listen to these things in. Okay, so this is where the change is done. This is where the change is emitted. Okay, change is done, change is emitted. This is like the MVVM pattern. If you guys can remember MVVM pattern, we have something called live data. Same thing. Okay, we have the action where it does the change. When we have the selector, we are listening to those things. Okay, now let's do one thing, and yeah, I have pretty much okay time. So we have defined a simple state, simple action, simple reducer, and simple selector. Okay, and believe me, if you guys feel confused, that is totally okay. But when you do this for like 10 or 20 times, it does make sense. As I mentioned, always practice make you perfect. So make sure you practice these things oftenly, then you will get to know these things. Don't expect this to be understand in one go. If you are doing a good job. Or if you find this hard, that is also normal. Keep doing this 10 or 20 times. I might have done this like 1,000 times now, and still sometimes it makes me confused, but when you get used to it, it's make more fun. Okay, now let's first we select something. Since we have a default state, we have some defaults value. We will select these things in our application. Okay, let's do that. Let's do a simple thing. In the app component, we have this progress bar. Right now we are using the app state service. I will remove the app state service for now, and I'll use the NGXS actually, and I don't need the app state service as well. Okay, so it's gonna show. But one thing I would do, I would have a toolbar and show my show the username on top. So I will use Mac toolbar, Mac toolbar. So I have to import that. I can remember it is coming from material toolbar, and I can say Mac toolbar module. I'll import that in here. Oops. I'll have import in here, and in app component, I will put a toolbar on top. Mac toolbar. Okay. So I have a toolbar on top, and on the bottom, I have something like this. So I need the email in here. Okay. I need to show the email maybe on the end or whatever. I need to show the email in here, but I need to get that email from the state. I need to select or pick it out from the state itself. So how I'm going to do that? Really simple. I can use something called store. I am going to get these things from the store. So I will inject the store in here. So store is coming from NGXS store. Okay. Now I need to show the email. Okay. So these things, as I mentioned, can change during the application time. So it's gonna be changeable one. If you guys can remember, the mobile networking, we had something called mutable data. It's something similar. We have in Angular, we call these observables. We will go into observable in a detailed version. Right now, we will have an observable to indicate this is a stream. Okay, this is a stream. We put this $sign. and the variable name email, and it's going to be a type of string. Okay, so we will have something called email, which can change in when we are within the application. So it's going to be observable string. Now we need to instantiate it. We need to select. We need to give a value for this string. Really simple. This dot email, and we are going to use the store to do that. This dot store, and in here store have something called select. Okay, from the store we're going to be selecting. There is two selects, select one, and select snapshot. Okay, so select will listen to any changes. Select once will only listen to one change and it will disappear. That means even though the name changes more than once, it won't listen to that. It will only take the first value and it will stop listening. Okay, but if you select, whenever the change happen, unless you unsubscribe, it will listen to all through the application. Right now I'm going to use select, and what the next thing is what I am going to be selecting. So if you guys can remember, we have defined a selector. Okay, select and selector for loading, but we did not have something for email. Let me create something for email as well. So I'm going to create a selector for email. Okay, and we are going to take it from the app state model. Rather than returning the email loading, I will return email. So now I have a selector within the app state called email. So if I tap into this, if I select this, I will get the current state email. Right now, the default one is hrandika.com. So in here, I will say, I will get app state, since those are static variables, app state email. So they are referring to this. Okay. So what is the error? It can be undefined. Okay, that is also true. And we can have undefined in here. That means the email, if you guys take a closer look, email can be defined or undefined, because we have put the question mark in here. That means the email can be there or cannot be there. But since this is initiated at the beginning, we can assume that it is there. But it's up to you. You can have an empty value like this, then it won't need this null check. Okay, but if you are having that, make sure that is returning. Okay, so now we have a definite value of email. Now we need to show it in here. Okay, so remember, this is an observable. We are selecting this from the store. Okay, so in order to show these things, since this is an observable, the thing that with observable is, unless you subscribe to this, you won't get the value. Okay, you need to subscribe to this value in order to get the value. So whatever the value that we are getting in here, the email will be stored in this stream, the email stream, and I can access this email stream in my app component right around here. Okay, really simple, like this. Okay, but this is not gonna show me the value, because this email is a string, not a string. Okay, as you can see, the type of this is an observable string. So it is not just a simple string, it is an observable string. That means it is coming as a streamable value. So in order to unstring this, or in order to take the value from the stream, we need to use a pipe called async. Okay, async. So when we put the async pipe in here, the async pipe, what it does is it's gonna unwrap the observable, take the inner value and give it to the email itself. Okay, so this async value is only available in here, but if you want to listen to in your class, you have to create, execute this subscribe method, And within the subscribe method, you can take that value. But in here, I have to say this email.subscribe. And whenever I want to see the values, I can just simply say email in here. And if I console log, there you go. I can see the value in the console itself. But this is something that we can omit for now. If you don't need that email to be in the control itself, we can have that in the HTML only. Then we have to have this email stream piped by this async pipe. Async pipe is a common pipe available in Angular. What you have to do is just feed this observable, and the observable will be automatically taken care of by async pipe. Okay, it will take the value and show. Okay, so there is some other variable interesting things going on with this async pipe, especially with observables. The thing with observable is when you subscribe to something, you need to unsubscribe, otherwise it will create memory leaks. We will show in more advanced or experience RxJS example. Right now, you don't have to worry about the unsubscribe and everything. This async pipe is doing that job for you. Okay, for now, for simplicity, we can keep it like that. Okay, so you can see I am getting this value from the state. I am getting this value from the state as a string variable, app state email. Yes, I am getting this. Now, the email it does not have an update action. It's up to you guys to do it on later on. We will I will give this as an assignment for this. Right now, the action is only to show loading. Now what we can do is we can have that same logic in here to listen to the loading stream. Okay, so we will create another stream called loading stream, and in this stream we will get a boolean. Okay, why we are listening to the boolean stream? This dot loading equal this dot store. We're going to be selecting app state, so app state loading. Okay, we are now listening to loading stream, which is coming from this app state, and it's going to say whether the value is true or false. By default, it is false. Now, if you guys can go here, we haven't bind the values. So there is the stream, loading stream is there. And we need to make sure this is showing or not. So we need to say ng if we will use the loading stream and make sure we have to provide the async pipe. Okay, if you do not provide the async pipe, what will happen is it's not going to listen to the subscriptions. And if only you provide async, then it will listen to the values itself. Okay, now since the if you look at the state of the loading, by default it is false, it is not showing. But let me change it in true in here. Now you guys can see it is showing. If I say false, initial state, it is gonna not show, and it is gonna show. So I can change this behavior. Okay, the state I can change. That's the whole point of introducing state management. In state management, I can introduce this state. We can introduce this state changes. So I need to execute this action. Okay, I just need to execute this action. When the execution has happened, and based on the loading value we providing, it's gonna change the state. And people who are listening to this, the selector will get the notification as well. So only thing that now we have to do is trigger this action. Okay, we need to trigger this action. That means we need to dispatch this action. As I mentioned earlier, this action can be dispatched from anywhere. Okay, that's the whole point of having these actions. We can dispatch this in anywhere. So I am going to dispatch this action. I'm going to dispatch this action using the admin grn page. So if I go to admin grn component, so I have this app service. I'm not going to use that. I will not use this method as well. I will say toggle method. I will use this toggle method in here. Go to the component. I'll use the toggle function. Is correct. Yes, toggle function. And rather than using the service that like we did earlier, I would use the store. So we will be using the store to dispatch actions as well. Okay. So now what I need to do is now what I need to do is need to do is these execute the action. We need to dispatch the action. So to do that, we can say this dot store dot dispatch. Okay, we are going to use something called dispatch. And what is the action that we need to do? New show loading action. If you guys can see, this is the action that we have created, and we need to define this action. We need to dispatch this action called show loading. Since this is a class, if you guys take a closer look, this is a class. We create a new instance of that action, and we need to give what is the one that we need to show in here. We need to do like true. Okay. So in this scenario, what we are doing when we are clicking on this button, we are dispatching an action called show loading with the value true. So it's go to show loading and it sees who is the state, who is the action handler in this scenario. This okay, the show action has executed. Now we need to take that value the user is sending. It is called loading, and we will update the state called loading in here. And whoever is listening, the selector, whoever is listening, listen to the changes. In this scenario, we have created the listener in here, loading state, and whoever listening to this will get notified, and this progress bar should get shown. Let's see. There you go. Okay, the same thing. What we did is now it's not gonna do it again because we are not sending the same correct value. If I hit toggle again and again, what will happen is it's only gonna say true. So always it's gonna be true. Okay, so clicking here, it says true. Clicking here, it says by reloading the state resets. Now if I hit login and it's true. So we have something called dispatchers where we say, okay, this is the action we need to dispatch, we need to do. So a simple button click, we are defining the action and we are changing the state. So by dispatching actions, we change the state. Whoever listening to this state changes get the notification and they react on that. Okay, in this scenario, a simple what do you call a simple show height function. Okay, so one thing I got, why we can't use classes for actions, can't we use functions? No. So the way NGXS has designed, it's going to be executing action by means of class. Okay, they don't utilize the functions. That is the design for the NGXS pattern. So we can't use function for these actions. Okay, only dispatchers accept only classes. Okay, that is the design. Yeah, any other questions, guys? We achieve the same thing, but in a different way. I know it's gonna take a little bit of time, you guys, to adjust to these concepts, but it's easy. You dispatch something, you dispatch an action, the action will react to that, the state will change. Once the state will change, anybody who is listening can react upon that. That's simple. Any questions up until this? I hope not. I will commit these changes. The state management. You guys can check out the source code. Push. I am brave enough to push to main branch, since this is a dummy one. Okay. Okay. So your goals is, guys, to have something like this. So we can utilize the same application if you like, but I would recommend you create a new one from scratch to make the practice more good for you guys. So our achievement, our goal is that this email that we are seeing in here, the email that we are seeing in here, is need to be changed from let's say GRN have a form in here, let's say email from email or something like that, but we have in login, and when you click that button, the email should change whatever the input in here. Okay, the input you have put in here. When you click change or whatever the button name that you like, it should change the value in the app toolbar. Okay, app toolbar in here, you need to change. Okay, think you guys are up for a good challenge on that. Anybody have any questions on the thing that you guys need to do? Think it makes yes. Okay. I think it makes more sense, right? You don't need like rocket science to do that. You just need to update the email, but from the admin GRN component in here, have something like input or something like that. When you click the change button, you have to change the name. Everybody got the assignment correctly? Raise your hand if you got the requirement. Raise your hand, please. Did not get the requirement. Do I need to explain it? Okay. Okay, everybody, I think got it. Okay. So I'm not gonna explain, right? So you guys know the requirement. Really simple one. Change the name on the top by changing the GRN section in here. Okay, I'll do some coding on top of this, and I think most of the things are UI related. Something that is not to be that's something to be repetitive. Okay, so you guys can check this out if you need or if you are interested in. All right, right now we talked about a lot of things. We have talked about the importance of creating small components. And how we can directly communicate with parent to child using input and output, how we can communicate with outer components using services, and how we can do a state management to achieve the same thing, but in a more highly advanced manner. Okay, so any other questions you guys have? If not, we can conclude for today. Any questions up until now? Okay. Let me stop sharing and let me stop.